Good morning and welcome to the Full Scottish on this Sunday, the 9th of February. For regular viewers, you'll know that the Full Scottish is Broadcasting Scotland's look at the stories which were making the headlines over the past week and a wee peek forward to what might be in the news in the coming week. I am Douglas MacKenzie and I'm pleased to introduce two guests in the studio. The first is Councillor Vicky Nicolson, SNP Councillor for Inverleith Ward on Edinburgh City Council and the SNP spokesperson there for Health and Social Care. Welcome again, Vicky.
Thank you, Douglas. Nice to see you again, and thank you.
And my second guest is Hugh Marshall, welcome and frequent contributor to Broadcasting Scotland programmes, founder of Talking Wales, and, well, until yesterday's final FA Cup game at Goodison Park, probably an Everton supporter who had renewed optimism in 2025. Welcome, Hugh.
I'm just glad you didn't mention the rugby.
No, there are some things which must be too painful for Welshmen to think about, so we'll draw a veil over that. We begin this news programme, as we begin all our news programmes, with the update from Ukraine on this day 1082 since the Russian full-scale invasion of the country. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has pledged his ongoing support of Russia in its war with Ukraine. Kim said the army and people of North Korea will invariably support and encourage the just cause of the Russian army and people to defend their sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. In response to the trilateral military cooperation among the US, Japan, and South Korea, Kim reiterated the country's, quote, unshakable policy of more highly developing the nuclear forces. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed this week that North Korean troops have returned to the front line in Russia's Kursk region after reports Moscow had withdrawn them due to heavy losses. Last month, South Korea said it suspected North Korea of preparing to send 11,000 more troops to Russia, in addition to about 11,000 soldiers who had been sent to bolster Moscow's forces in the near three-year war. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said there would be no imminent end to fighting in Ukraine, despite Donald Trump's promises to broker a swift end to the conflict. I am not sure we are weeks away from peace talks, and I say that because our assessment, which I'm quite sure the US shares, is that Vladimir Putin shows absolutely no appetite for negotiation and to bring this war to an end, Lammy said after meeting Zelensky and senior Ukrainian officials in Kyiv. Lammy said discussions with European and G7 allies over what types of guarantees might be necessary would run for some months yet, and it was premature to anticipate what role the UK would play. Russia says it sees no positive steps from the new US administration on disarmament, RIA state news agency reports. Gennady Gatilov, Russia's permanent representative to the UN, said in an interview Russia was, quote, ready to maintain smooth relations of cooperation with any American administration. We would be ready to do this within the framework of the Conference on Disarmament. So far, we do not see any positive progress in this regard in Geneva, Gatilov said. President Zelensky says he has met the chair of NATO's military committee to review the capacities of Ukraine's long-range weaponry in a post on X. During a visit with Giuseppe Cavodragoni to a defence industry enterprise, Zelensky confirmed key topics of discussion include the continued military assistance from NATO member states and direct investments in domestic production of long-range drones. A Russian telecoms cable in the Baltic Sea was damaged by an external impact, Russian state media news agency TASS reported. The country's state-owned Rostelecom company said restoration work was underway, but did not provide further details, and it was unclear when the damage occurred. The Baltic Sea region has been on high alert after a string of outages affecting power cables, telecom links, and gas pipelines between the Baltics and Sweden or Finland, leading to increased surveillance operations by NATO members. All were believed to have been caused by ships dragging anchors along the seabed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia has denied any involvement. Well, General Keith Kellogg, President Trump's Ukraine envoy, said the Trump peace plan will not be presented at the Munich Security Conference next week. Instead, he will consult with European allies, report back to the president so that he can present the proposals himself at some unspecified future time. So Trump's promise of an immediate end to the war in Ukraine is not materializing. But Hugh, do you see any prospect of a diplomatic settlement?
Yeah, Trump said it would be all over within 24 hours of him being elected. So I'm not sure what's happened there. But yeah, it's a mess, and I think the fact that you got Trump in power now has made the situation worse. Putin is literally laughing his head off on a daily basis. So I think it's just really, it's vital now that the EU particularly, come together behind Ukraine and ensure that they get, what they need in order to repel Russia from their country.
Thank you, Vicky. I mean, anything to add to that? But I'm also interested. I've met so many Ukrainians who are settled, resettled, temporarily settled in Edinburgh. I wonder what your feeling as a councillor is. What you're hearing from them on their hopes and fears for the future.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I think Trump's electoral success has kind of galvanized the comments from North Korea about fully supporting Putin, etc. But it leads people to believe that things are not going to get better; they're going to get worse. I don't have that many Ukrainian people settled in my ward, but I certainly have attended quite a number of events with the Ukrainian people, and I do find them to be a very warm and optimistic group of people, the people that have settled in Edinburgh. And I hope that something comes of Zelensky speaking to Vance in Munich this week, which apparently is due to happen. And I see that Trump has just come out today and said that Putin wants to stop people dying, and he had a chat on the phone with them. And although nobody is confirming or denying that from Russia, so I don't know. I agree with what Hugh said. The EU needs to really be strong here and try and work together if possible.
Thank you. Now, the next story, well, like most stories today, has Trump hanging over it, and that's the Middle East. At least 48,181 Palestinians have been killed and 111,638 wounded in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023. 3 more Israeli hostages were released by Hamas in Gaza yesterday, while Israel released 183 prisoners. In media reports, the 3 Israeli hostages were reported to be undernourished, while the Palestinians reported maltreatment in Israeli prisons, with 7 needing hospitalization. It seems as prisoners from Gaza are released in Israel, just as many prisoners are being taken by the Israeli military in the West Bank, as if they're topping up their supply. But there is a ceasefire of sorts. Again, Hugh, is there hope for the future in what's happening in Gaza and the Middle East generally,
Yeah.
or has Trump just splattered it all with his comments this week?
I think it's been quite interesting because obviously Trump's comments, and it was very strange how the media's been covering his comments as if Trump is playing some sort of 5D chess, when in reality he's just an incredibly stupid man who sees the world through the lens of a property developer. He doesn't understand, sort of the meaning of, Palestine and what the land means to those people. So I was surprised actually that, following his statements, that Hamas have continued with the ceasefire. I was, I was expecting them to have, sort of taken umbrage with what was being said. So, the fact that the ceasefire is holding is good news. The fact that it's moving on to another phase where hopefully, again, and the IDF have moved out of the central zone that was cutting Palestine in half. That's good news. So, there are good things happening, but it is quite telling as well that still the families of the hostages that are being still, being held by Hamas are upping their criticism of Netanyahu, saying that he should be leading those discussions himself, the next phase of discussions. But who knows? There's just so much chaos going on at the moment, with Trump saying things on one hand, and obviously Elon Musk, sort of rifling his way through everybody's private information in the United States. So it's a confused state. Sort of fingers crossed that things do go well. It is sad to see that that the hostages clearly have been mistreated. But I think it is interesting. I think we need balance here as well when we're reporting is, a lot of the Palestinians who are being released, they're being mistreated as well. So, it's not just a case of, Hamas, and, the BBC were covering it from almost through, purely Israeli hostage, sort of conditions, as opposed to looking at the Palestinians who are coming out. Some of them are, children and women.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you would have to say that the Palestinian prisoners are held in a jail, a stable environment, whereas the Hamas hostages, I mean, there wasn't a stable place in Gaza. They were in bunkers, so there's not very much that one could expect. Vicky, it seems that Trump is the only game in town in this, with his statements about creating the Riviera in Gaza, and as Hugh says, acting just like a property developer. What do you think of the UK response? And I suppose we can contrast with what John Swinney has said and what Keir Starmer has said to Trump's actions.
Yeah, well, we actually, as a group, a political group, we had our full council on Thursday, and we took up an emergency motion to condemn the comments of Trump and his call for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. I don't think that David Lammy not condemning Trump is good enough. I think that Labour seem to be running, scared of tariffs and upsetting Trump, and just won't call anything out. I don't know if you heard Stephen Flynn's comments calling on the UK government to urgently, officially and finally recognise the state of Palestine. And I would hope that over the next short time we'll hear that the UK government is going to be much stronger. It's very disappointing that they're letting us all down in the United Kingdom and in Scotland. I mean, a Palestinian state is their inalienable right, and the Scottish government certainly stand by that very strongly.
Do you still think that there is mileage in a two-state solution? I mean, everyone in the West not directly involved has spoken about this for years, but neither Netanyahu nor Hamas believe in a two-state solution. Fatah do, but they're not in power. And what are your thoughts, Hugh? Is this a way? Is it still a way forward?
Yeah, well, it has to be. There can't be any other solution. Palestinians, their right to exist within their own lands need to be respected, and Israelis, need to live in peace as well. I would imagine, the majority of the people in both of those communities want to see that. Unfortunately, you've got extremes at both on both sides who are, sort of running things at the moment. And until that issue is sorted, we know that, what's happening now is continuing because Netanyahu is desperate to cling on to, office, because as soon as he goes, he's, facing criminal prosecutions, at home and abroad. So, he's not anything he's doing now. He's doing it from a personal perspective, and, sort of all hell to anything else. But clearly, Hamas isn't the answer. But it's up to the people of Palestine to make that decision about, how they're governed. But, also people of Israel need to realise as well that, backing far right-wing parties isn't helping their cause either.
Thank you. The next story, guess what? President Trump, as I say, hangs over almost everything today. So he has continued with his start of his second presidency with barrage of proclamations, from ethnically cleansing Gaza, as we've mentioned, to letting Elon Musk dismantle the system of government, and now cutting aid to South Africa over so-called racial discrimination against Afrikaners, the cuts to US aid, and cutting billions from medical research. Now, the first thing any of us learn about government in the United States is the checks and balances of the three branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial, with the legislative, i.e. Congress, supposedly having the strongest powers. But do you think, Vicky, that's still in force, or are Trump and Musk successfully dismantling it?
I hope it's too early to tell. I think we're realising that it's not a passive game, and you can't sit back and hope that the institutional design will save you. People need to take action and resist. And Trump didn't win a landslide. There's a significant portion of American society, probably a majority actually, that opposes him, I hope. So I think this last few weeks has been a wake-up call. It's been a whirlwind, and I really hope that the system, can still respond to the real threats that Trump poses for every single one of us. Yeah.
Thanks. So, Hugh, Vicky is sounding quite optimistic there, and there have been some judicial attempts to hold back Trump. For example, throwing out the rejection of American citizenship coming automatically with birthright. Are you as optimistic about Trump and Musk being contained?
Yeah, I agree. Again, I just looking up now at, sort of the favourability and unfavourability, sort of polls. And, obviously he was ahead from a favourability, but that seems to be moving now, with more people seeing him as being unfavourable. So, as I say, he didn't win with a landslide. It was a small margin, even though, again, Trump, in his own ridiculous way, lies about, that it was the greatest victory ever and millions. Nobody knows how big a victory it was, when in reality we know exactly how big the victory was, and it wasn't as big as he says it was. But yeah, but I think the danger for me though is obviously, that they've, it's funny because people are sort of thinking, oh my God, they're actually doing what they said they were going to do. Because I think under the first version of Trump, there were sensible people around who were there, acting as sort of checks and balances. Whereas this time round, I think they just realised, well, they're just going to do it. And I think the big danger here is obviously, sort of judges are going to be, busy over the next months and years, sort of dealing with a lot of these things. But it's when they start ignoring what the judges say, and I think that's the big danger, because people like Musk, they just literally think they're untouchable. I really do hope that we do see, a day when Musk, faces his moment in court, because what he's doing is, is frankly criminal. But yeah, I think the big thing is he's come in this time. He was thwarted the last time, for whatever reason, to make America great again. He's come back and promised to make America great again. He's promised to make the unlistened to and the people whose lives didn't get better under Biden, even though the economy was improving, but a lot of people didn't feel the benefits of that. If those people in 4 years' time can't, afford their weekly shop, or the cost of filling up their pickup has gone up, and the cost of eggs is still extremely high, then he's going to be in trouble, because obviously he's promised something, and he has to deliver on it. If he does deliver, and these measures do have a positive economic impact on the United States, then we're in trouble, because everybody's going to want to copy them across the world. So I think it is important now that the rest of the world comes together and stands up to him, because there's real potential here. The things that they're doing economically in the United States, there's a real danger. I was reading today that the dollar as the gold standard around the world could fall, and the euro could replace it. And what a wonderful day that would be.
Thank you, Vicky. Hugh makes an interesting point there. In the rest of the world, we tend to judge American presidents by their foreign policy, but as an American, you're going to judge them by, as Hugh says, the price of eggs. But there are, of course, impacts that the United States, as the most powerful country, has on the rest of the world. And we've seen some action. We saw a German court demanding that Musk hand over X records on political campaigning this week. Britain has been very quiet on Trump, and Keir Starmer has been seen as a good chap by Trump. What should Britain be doing in response to a Trump presidency?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier about I think the UK government is terrified, terrified of tariffs, terrified of the threat that might pose to an economy that they are making a real hash of at the moment in the United Kingdom, and so they're so desperate to keep those lines of communication open that they won't call them out. I think Starmer, is certainly trying to implement some populist austerity measures, talking about there's not enough fact checking of the disinformation that's been spread out there about migration, how actually it hugely contributes to our economy and public services, especially here in Scotland, actually. But I think Starmer's quite happy to go along with that type of rhetoric in order to maintain what he thinks is a good relationship with Trump. And that's not the way that I would like to the country that I live in to be run. And that type of relationship is not something that I want to see between the United Kingdom and the US at present, with Trump being so damaging. And some of the policies that he's implementing are terribly frightening. I think the Scottish government has got the balance a little bit more possibly right. So we're talking about what's good, but what's also bad about what's good about our relationship with the United States, but also what is bad about what Trump is trying to implement. So what would I like to see? I'd like to see stronger language. I'd like to see I'd like David Lammy to have come straight out when Trump first mentioned his Israeli Riviera in the West Bank and called out the ethnic cleansing that he was proposing, rather than sitting back and saying, oh yes, well, it is a terrible place, the West Bank, and people's homes have been destroyed. I think we need strength, and we need the United Kingdom to be the kind of country it is, which is a country that's full of people that believe in justice and want to see that.
And separating the United Kingdom there from Scotland, Vicky, Don Jr. said that Trump will definitely visit his golf course in Scotland this year. So should we be rolling out the red carpet for him, or should we be embracing the spirit of Janey Godley?
Absolutely. Well, I always would be erring towards embracing the spirit of Janey Godley, but we have to be careful, I suppose, how we work things out here. But actually, what Trump did with his golf course, particularly the one in Aberdeenshire, is very like what he's suggesting that he does in the West Bank. He absolutely is happy to go in and bulldoze people's homes in order to develop the land and the property in the way that he wants. And he doesn't discriminate from one country to the next. He just wants people to roll over and follow his lead and profit before people, before humanity, before society. And so I won't be getting a red carpet out for him for sure. And if he does happen to visit the city chambers in Edinburgh, I'll be working from home that day.
A very diplomatic response to that. Okay, our next story. Hugh alluded to this, that if right-wing policies in the United States are successful, there's a danger that they will be adopted across the world. And polls have shown Reform gaining against Labour as well as the Tories in England and Wales. But the response to this by Labour seems to be to consider stealing the right-wing policies of the Tories and Reform on migration, on crime, or on disabled people, quote, taking the mickey. There was a study done last year by the universities of Oxford, Lausanne, Berlin, Barcelona, and others, looking at the effect of right-wing parties and saying that voters tend to prefer the original to the copy, so that right-wing policies, if they're adopted by the left, all they do is move the goalpost to the right, rather than stopping the right-wing rise. And we saw in Germany last week the huge protests on the street after the CDU for the first time used AfD, the far-right party's votes, on a vote on immigration, which had always been resisted by all mainstream political parties in Germany. So the question, Hugh, how should centre-left parties resist the rhetoric of the populist right?
Yeah, funnily enough, yesterday I spent the day in Merthyr Tydfil, which was the base, really, for the Chartist movement in the early 1800s, which was a forerunner for getting democracy, not just in Wales, but in the UK, to get people the ability to vote in elections. And the discussion, it was organised by Melyn Drafod, which is the Welsh for think tank. So it's a think tank called Think Tank in Welsh, which was actually, we were discussing exactly this subject of, how do we take on the far right. How do we, tackle misinformation and disinformation and the tactics they use? And it was a really interesting discussion. We had contributions from Beth Winter, who was the former Labour MP, who's now left the Labour Party because of their stance on a number of things, but Gaza in particular. And both she and Leanne Wood, the former leader of Plaid Cymru, are going around the valleys and meeting people to discuss, what are the issues that are facing them. And I think that is, one of the positive moves. I think you can't take them on social media. You can't just, refute their claims, because they're saying things that people, want to agree with. So, it is a challenge. But we need to, call them out and and take on facts. The big thing that really bothers me, and this is something that we've done on Talking Wales, where we looked at the issue of immigration. You know, immigration is framed by the media, in general, BBC, the newspapers, by the Labour Party, Conservative Party, as a problem. It's not a problem. The reason, the majority of people, in those 600, the 700,000 figure for last year, half were students, half were people coming here to work, because we haven't got the workforce at the moment to run out to feed our economy, and it's one of the reasons why the economy isn't growing. So the fact that Labour are moving towards trying to sort of almost say, yes, that there is a problem, and we're going to cut it more than them. You can't, you're not going to take them on and win them, and beat them like that. You've got to call it out, and we've got to start talking to people in communities and explaining people in a non-patronising manner, and speak to people and listen to people. I think that's the big thing, that what they found in the reason Beth Winter and Leanne Wood did their first one on the Gurnos estate, which is one of the largest council estates in Europe. It was at one time, and they did it there because that's where Farage launched his UK what do you call it, the campaign for the general election, and it's also another place where they've been, because they know that is the kind of area where there's deprivation, where they can get support. What was interesting was, the media were reporting that Farage had gone to Merthyr and to Gurnos. You'd speak to the local people, there were no local people there. They were all bussed in. Nobody knew where this meeting was going to be, because they kept it secret, because they knew that the people of Merthyr would turn up and protest. So, the media needs to do a better job of calling it out. But, we've got to stop this nonsense about immigration being a problem, because, people have this impression in their minds that, they can't get a hospital appointment or a doctor's appointment because of mass immigration. I live in an ex-coal mining valley in South Wales, where, the NHS is struggling. It's difficult to get a doctor's appointment. There are no immigrants here. The only immigrants who are living in this valley are people who've come in from Africa to look after our old people in care homes and hospitals, because we can't find the people locally. And somebody had an argument with somebody on social media. Yeah, but I bet you those jobs weren't advertised locally. They are being advertised locally. I checked. And they said, well, I bet you they're not paying them much. They're offering between £28,000 and £30,000 a year for these care jobs. They can't get people physically to do these jobs. So this is where we need to start, is stop agreeing that immigration is a problem, and explaining to the public why immigration, from an economic perspective, is important for economic growth. Otherwise, we're in big trouble.
Thanks, you. Vicky, I'm sure those comments on immigration will chime with you, as we have a similar problem in Scotland. But for a long time, there's been a kind of Scottish exceptionalism that this problem of the right wing is confined to England. But we see reform rising in the opinion polls in Scotland. We had Anna Sarwar saying that he would be happy to take good ideas from reform. So it's not something we can ignore. So how do we deal with it in Scotland?
Well, it's, as far as I'm concerned, Sarwar's comments are another own goal from an increasingly desperate Anna Sarwar, Scottish Labour in general. I mean, people don't vote Labour for austerity to be imposed, and that's losing them voters. It's clearly losing them voters. Some of their policies, the national insurance rise has been one of them. It's going to affect everyone. It's going to affect business. It's going to affect care organisations. It's going to affect third sector organisations. It's going to affect women more than anyone else as well. And when I posed that to one of the new MPs, she went, well, women are always the hardest hit. And I thought, gosh, that's an interesting rationale. So, I mean, I think it would be nice to hear what, like Anna Sarwar, clarify which of Farage's backwards and damaging ideas he's open to. And I have heard floated recently that Sarwar is considering what he calls the Edinburgh model for the next Holyrood election, i.e. Labour not winning a majority, which is what happened in Edinburgh Council, and going into coalition with the unionist parties, despite the fact that really the SNP and Labour probably are the most closely aligned ideologically of the parties in Holyrood, and there's only one thing really that separates us, and that's this constitutional issue. But this anything to keep the SNP out is pure desperation from Sarwar, and I mean, people are just not going to buy it. The latest poll looks like in 2026 that there's going to be 74 pro-independence MSPs who will be elected, and that will be the largest ever pro-independence majority. So it is a total own goal for Labour, who, are not all terrible people. Of course they're not. They've joined the Labour movement. They're quite like the rest of us in Scotland. So, yes. I mean, Labour can't be trusted in London or in Edinburgh. So I hope people are continue to listen to what they're saying and the language that they're using, because it's deeply, deeply disappointing for Labour supporters. It must be.
I'm interested in your view. I mean, people have talked about the barrage of policies and ideas coming from Trump in his first week, but the Labour government in Westminster and Labour Party in Scotland having to follow suit just seem to have been a complete shambles in their first months in government, and the interview that Anna Starwer gave the other day just seemed a complete shambles. I wonder, will he survive until the Holyrood election? Do you think?
Well, I'm not really sure. I hope not. I did recently. I've heard there's been a bit of airtime given to Monica Lennon on Radio Scotland about a couple of policies she's introduced, and I quite like Monica, and actually she's was an independent supporter as well, which probably means that she wouldn't be in the running. So I don't know. Can he survive? Who else have they got? I mean, it's slim pickings, isn't it, in Labour?
Indeed, and Monica Lennon stood against them at the last leadership election, so it'd be hard for her to make a comeback, I would think.
Yeah, so I don't know, but I mean, the winter fuel payment, maintaining the 2-child cap, hiking national insurance, refusing to compensate the WASPy women, the skyrocketing energy prices. It's a very, very bad list for a party that's not even been in power for a year. It's unbelievable, actually, that they haven't read the room at all and realised that they're going completely in the wrong direction. And the fact that Starmer's kept Reeves in post when she's so clearly not up to the job is interesting.
And other than the UK government's actions, Hugh, is Labour in Wales in similar disarray to Scotland?
More. What we're seeing now is we're seeing. Well, no, because it's on a weekly basis now, where we've got sitting Senedd members who are saying they're not going to be standing at the elections in May. The big and obviously, and I think this is where the Scottish dynamic comes in. Obviously, in Scotland, they're telling everybody that you vote Labour in Scotland. I mean, you're going to have a government in London, Westminster, and government in Edinburgh who are working together. Well, in Wales, that was the big promise. Is sort of after 14 years of Tories saying no to everything, we're going to have a government in Westminster, both ends of the M4 working together collaboratively. And just this week, sort of the Senedd, majority of Labour Senedd members support the devolution of the Crown Estate as it is in Scotland, and in Westminster, Nia Griffith the MP for Llanelli said, "Oh no, you're not having that." And everything that they've said that they would do, they're not doing it. And as you've just said, Vicky, that Starmer's. It's just been a car crash, hasn't it? Because, and again, this is the issue: is they didn't win the general election. Yes, they got 60% of the seats with 30% of the votes. He got less votes than Corbyn did in his first election. Corbyn got almost 40%, I think. Than Starmer did. Reform won that election for Labour. You can see that Reform took those votes off those seats from the Conservatives, and that's why Starmer is in. So, it's no surprise because they didn't have any policies. These 5 missions, and all we heard from Starmer was that his father was a tool maker. He worked in a factory. He actually owned the factory, which is a little bit, sort of disingenuous. And the factory was going to put the Labour Party back in, for the working man. And they haven't got any policies. They've got a massive majority that would allow them to be radical. And they're just rubbish, aren't they? It's embarrassing. Mm-hmm. I feel sorry for them to a certain extent. But, come 2026 in the local elections, the Senedd elections, again, unfortunately, Reform are going to benefit from that. We're going to have, a big chunk of Reform in the Senedd. But, I'm quite positive that Plaid Cymru will have the majority of, or not a majority, but of all the parties that are standing. So hopefully we might be in a position where Labour will have to be the junior partners in a coalition with Plaid Cymru, because otherwise the other choice is that the Tories and Reform and Labour allow them to do that. So I think we need to work cross-party, and I think there's a lot of will to do that. But I just find all the time when you mention about working cross-party, it's the Labour Party who stop it. And that's the disappointing thing, because we agree on so many things, but at the end of the day, they just seem to be blinded by power. Sorry.
Interesting.
End of my sermon for this Sunday.
Delivered very well, thank you. Looking now specifically at the UK economy, and this week the Bank of England cut interest rates, and at the same time half the UK's growth predictions, which has been Chancellor Rachel Reeves' supposed engine to save the country. Labour in Westminster have announced plans for AI projects and for small modular nuclear reactors. Now, the AI they're funding, this is after they've pulled the plug on AI funding for a supercomputer in Edinburgh University. Their energy bills are going to be rising again in April, it seems, and there has been no investment announced from the UK government for saving the Grangemouth refinery. Two things about Grangemouth, Vicky. First of all, there's Anna Sarwar saying before the election that yes, Labour of course would step in, save it, and save the jobs. And now in his interview last week saying, "Oh, it's a private company. There's nothing we can do." So there's that aspect of it, and also what can be done for Grangemouth and what should be done for Grangemouth.
I listened to both Brian Leishman, who's the MP for Falkirk now, and Michelle Thompson, who's the MSP for that area, this morning on the radio, and they were both actually saying the same thing, despite the fact that Brian Leishman is Labour, and he campaigned on saving Grangemouth. He promised the people of Falkirk that if he was elected, he would save Grangemouth, a bit like Labour did, generally speaking, in their campaign. What Michelle Thompson was suggesting was that, everyone needs to come to the table. The UK government needs to act, and Jim Ratcliffe himself has to come to the table. There's a wee bit of responsibility for, making sure that the workers can have a just transition that does fall at the feet of the Scottish government. But generally speaking, we're pretty much hamstrung, and it has to be the UK government who act. And as you say, they've deceived us, and they've they've left a community with lots and lots of highly qualified people who are very well trained and very professional, and they don't now have any jobs to go to. And to talk then about confirm that they'll give the go-ahead to nuclear power in Scotland, despite all the concerns about the radioactive waste they produce and the issues that Scotland has there, and that we have this endless supply of renewable energy. I feel that is very distracting away from what we should be focusing on, which is Scotland still does produce, more oil and gas than anywhere else, I think, in Europe at the moment. And we don't have a refinery, and they're about to make sure that we don't have the capacity to I suppose, stand on our own 2 feet. It's on the UK government. They've kind of boxed themselves into so many different positions in the last 6 or 7 months. Their budget, national insurance, staying out the EU single market, and now Grangemouth. And it's not going to win them any friends in Scotland at all. It's very, very upsetting, actually, for people that live in this part of Scotland and the whole country.
Yeah, just to pick up on your point there about Scotland producing oil and gas. As I understand it, Grangemouth in its current state cannot process North Sea oil because it's too heavy a grade. But the plan was mooted for them to produce safer aviation fuel. And the Secretary of the Unite Union was saying that the UK government and the Scottish government have been missing in action in allowing this transition to happen. Which I can understand her concern about jobs, but in reality, what can the Scottish government do? I mean, you said, yes, there's a responsibility for reskilling, but I mean, this always happens when industrial plant closes down. We will retrain the workers, but it's like putting an elastoplast on a gaping flesh wound.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I heard Sharon Graham's comments, and I also heard someone else from Unite the Union on Radio Scotland earlier. I must admit, I'm not completely on top of what the Scottish government should have done around the aviation fuel, although I have heard it spoken about at my own SNP branch meetings and in in my other job where I work for one of the MSPs. I certainly hope that people will be writing to their SNPs and saying, what are you doing in order to move us forward here? But until the right people are around the table, it's a bit of a moot point, isn't it? Because Ratcliffe says he's losing money, he doesn't want the business to continue, and the UK government have said it's a purely business decision. So we are in a difficult position. But no, I think I shall ask my boss, who I work for, Angus, who's one of the MSPs. I shall ask him what the Scottish government have been doing, and I can come back to you on that, Douglas.
Good. I welcome that. I don't expect you to comment directly on Grangemouth, which is very much a Scottish issue. But there's a more general point that one might consider a refinery in Scotland as a strategic interest, and I'm sure there are similar situations in Wales. Is this something which is too important to be left to private industry?
Oh yeah, definitely. We just look at what happened with steel in Port Talbot. There were promises made that with the Labour government, everything would be sorted out. The First Minister Vaughan Gething, who had to resign, flew out to India for talks, making himself look all important. The reality was, that Tata could make the steel cheaper in India, so they closed it down on 3,000 people losing their jobs. To Plaid Cymru, we're arguing about right. Just pick, if it's losing £1 million a day or whatever it was. Nobody knew how or why it was losing £1 million a day. There was nothing sort of shown to demonstrate that. Right, give them £1, give it to us, and we'll run it as a cooperative. So again, I don't understand why these kind of moves aren't looked at. We've got a refinery in Pembroke, which is an American-owned one, and it is quite a large one. I think it refines double the capacity of Grangemouth, so it is a large one. But clearly, there's no mention about any threat to that, because you could imagine, sort of following the closure of the steelworks, if there was any mention of the refinery in Pembroke closing, because the economy of West Wales is hugely reliant on the refinery and the jobs that are linked to that industry there. But yeah, the cynic in you just makes you think, well, yeah, this is, for a country to lose a bit of infrastructure, the cynic would say, well, it weakens Scotland, but the closure of Port Talbot has weakened Wales greatly, and that was done, sort of under a Labour government in Cardiff, and the Labour government who came into power, who could have intervened and didn't. So I don't know whether it's, you could look at that, but I would just put it down to, I just don't think they know what they're doing, literally.
That's encouraging. Thank you. Our final story today is the Scottish budget, which follows on very nicely from comments that you've both made about cross-party agreement and cooperation. And in Holyrood, the Scottish budget stage 1 passed record NHS funding, pensioner winter heating payment, plans to scrap the two-child cap, £15 billion for local government, and £768 million for affordable homes. Tories voted against and Labour abstained. So it was good to see the idea, which began with the Scottish Parliament, that there would be cross-party cooperation with the Greens and the Liberals supporting the budget. But as you were saying, Labour abstaining, it just seems like, well, on the one hand, it seems like a power thing. Cross-party agreement is fine, but not where we're involved. But also, I wonder if they're shooting themselves in the foot, because many of these were policies that they demanded. In fact, before the budget, they got what they asked for and still voted against it. So what's your view?
Yeah, it's bizarre because, like I say, they're saying one thing in Scotland and doing the opposite in Wales. It was interesting. I was listening to Radio 4 this morning, and there was actually discussion about the budget in Scotland. They had Alex Cole-Hamilton from the Lib Dems, who was saying that they were going to support the budget, but he was still doing sort of SNP bad. But it was interesting that the presenter pointed out to him that the number of GPs per head is higher in Scotland than anywhere else in the UK. But that still wasn't good enough for Mr. Hamilton. But yeah, but this is the thing. In Wales, the first bit of the budget was going through last week, and in Wales, Labour need one other Senedd member to vote with them. Luckily for them, the leader of the Conservatives and another member of the Conservatives weren't able to vote because they were in the United States in a prayer meeting, because they're sort of evangelists, and they're funded by some sort of evangelical sort of order. So the fact that they basically allowed the budget to go through, which is a good thing, but the fact that they were in, it's mad, isn't it? You got politicians who realise that the people are really concerned about politics and how sort of members behave in the US in a prayer meeting to support Donald Trump is madness. I think in Wales it looks like they're going to do a deal with a single Lib Dem member, which they've done in the past. I think it was 8 years ago, the leader of the Lib Dems, she actually sort of supported the Labour government, and she became the education minister. I don't know whether it'll be that sort of deal this time, but Yeah, but like I say, a lot of the stuff that they're abstaining on in Scotland is exactly the stuff that's in the Labour the budget in Wales. So it's stupid, childish.
Thanks, Vicky. Your local MSP got a name check there from you, Mr. Cole Hamilton.
Yes,
I'm
he is my.
interested in your view on the Labour strategy. I mean, you've spoken a few times about Labour and Anna Sarwar's missteps. I mean, this seems like it could really backfire, voting against things which are popular not just amongst the general population, but in the Labour Party itself in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, for people that are paying attention, they'll be thinking, "What's the point in Labour in Scotland right now?" Because some of the measures that have been put into this budget are so helpful. So I sit on what's known as the Integration Joint Board. That's the Health and Social Care Partnership. So there's certain hosted NHS services that work alongside the council to deliver basically prevention in the community to stop people ending up in acute services. There's ring-fenced money being put in to deal with unscheduled care, to help people out of hospital, to help them rehabilitate and go back to their homes, to stop the delayed discharge, for one example. And some of those measures are going to be enormously far-reaching and have a hugely positive impact, I hope. The problem we have, though, is even at council level, a lot of the councils are, led by the unionist coalitions who don't necessarily want Scottish government policies to be implemented well. The Scottish Parliament is now clearly divided into parties who want to get things done, like the SNP, Lib Dems, Greens, and parties who don't.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that's it for this week's Full Scottish. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We raised £20,000 from April to the end of 2024, 16,000 short of our £36,000 target. We had to borrow 12,000 to enable us to pay our bills and survive. But the pressure is still on, and we need to find enough regular donors to give us financial security. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around £2,500. We need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debts as well. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you very much to my guests today for giving up part of their Sunday, Councillor Vicky Nicolson and Hugh Marshall. And thank you to you at home or wherever you are for watching. Please join us on Broadcasting Scotland during the week with our nightly news programme at 7 o'clock and various parliamentary programmes during the day. Remember also that Broadcasting Scotland has an account on Blue Sky and at the other place. If you'd like to comment on the stories or on the station, please use those. But for now, goodbye, thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.